to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that are read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's the author of the book Make Sales Magical. No other than Mr. Craig Andrews.
Hey Daniel, how are you this evening?
I'm fabulous, fabulous like you, Mr. Craig. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
So my name is Craig Andrews. I run a agency called Allies for Me, and spent 6 years in the Marine Corps, and got a couple engineering degrees when I discovered I liked marketing better than engineering. Still like engineering, but I like marketing more. And but the one thing I discovered that I was not good at was selling.
True.
And that's kind of important if you're in business, is at some point you have to be able to figure out how to sell what you sell. And so it hit me one day that if you could combine a sales process that anybody can learn with an offer that nobody can refuse, a lot of your sales problems are gone. And so that's kind of the subject of the Make Sales Magical. It's the second part of that equation. It's about making an offer for high ticket, complex sales that nobody can refuse, and naturally leads to your high ticket offer.
Nobody can refuse. Mr. Craig Andrews, thank you so much for sharing your talent to the world. So, what are the key principles that you outline for closing deals faster?
Well, what happens so many times when we're doing a high ticket sale, I liken it to a guy who walks into a bar, sees somebody cute on the other side of the bar, and walks up to her and says, "Hey, you're kind of cute. May I have your phone number? Better yet, let's just get married." And we don't do that because it's inappropriate. We know it's inappropriate, but for some reason, when it comes to the high ticket sale, that's exactly what we do. And what we do in normal life, in normal dating relationships, is when we meet somebody, we say, "Hey, would you like to go out for coffee sometime?" The coffee date, it removes the risk. It removes financial risk. It removes commitment risk. Usually, you drive there separately during daylight hours, and women have told me that they'll often have a girlfriend call in about 15 minutes into the date to see if they need a rescue. Do you need me to get you out of there? Well, we do that in dating. The reason we go on the coffee dates is because we hope for bigger and better things. And so why not do that in business as well? Instead of going immediately to this big commitment, go to something that's kind of like a coffee date, a mini project, and we call those first time offers.
Interesting. Mr. Craig, so how does the book suggest building values to customer are willing to pay higher price?
Well, if you think about it, so I'm a marketer. When somebody gets on the phone with me or gets on a Zoom call, a sales call, I make two assumptions. The first assumption is they have a bad marketing experience in their past, because that's generally the case. The second is they have a revenue problem that they're trying to solve. That's the only reason somebody gets on a sales call with me. Well, whatever your business is, the chances are they have a bad experience in their past, and they have a problem they believe you can solve. And so when you get on it, um, the idea is, let me identify some small problems that I can solve for you. And you do that in the mini project that's kind of scoped out in that first time offer. And it turns out a couple things happen when you solve a problem in somebody's life. One, they're appreciative that you solved this problem for them. But the other thing is, when you solve a problem in somebody's life, it causes the release of oxytocin in the body. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone that bonds baby to mother. And when you solve a problem in someone's life, it bonds them to you. And so that's one of the things that helps build trust. And another thing, when you do it, you want to do it in workshops, you want to do it where you're working together. As a matter of fact, shortly, about a half hour before we recorded this interview, I was wrapping up one of the workshops with somebody that's going through our kind of our sales funnel, and they bought a first time offer, and we were actually working on the deliverables. And we get to the end and ask them a question. And I said, "What was your biggest takeaway from today?" And both of them told me the same thing. And it was something that I wanted them to believe. I could have told them this when we first met, but they wouldn't have believed me. It took going through this process for them to come to their own realization of this fact. And when they do that, it just feels better, right? When people come to their own belief instead of being told, it feels better. They don't feel critiqued, and they believe it more deeply. And these are all things that I want them to believe. I need them to believe for us to be able to move forward.
Beautifully articulated, Mr. Greg. I like the oxytocin part. So, what sales myth or outdated techniques does the book challenge?
Um, you know, the outdated technique would be just that people are the need to go straight for the sale. That's a little bit outdated. Something else I would say is outdated, um, that it challenges is there's a lot of the sales training. The way I would describe it is it's like you're driving cattle into this boxed canyon, and you hope the cattle never notice that you're driving them into the canyon with no escape. And the reality is, most sales questions are focused on driving into this place of no escape. And when you do that, it threatens their autonomy. It makes them feel unsafe. If your goal, if you need to build trust for them to write a big check to you, making them feel unsafe is not the way there. The way you make them feel safe is you preserve their autonomy. That's their ability to make decisions for themselves. And this process is designed to do that.
Certainly. So, Mr. Craig, how does the book define a successful salesperson in today's competitive market?
So I would say the successful salesperson, I don't know if I fully outline it in this book, but at least the way it plays out is you're not asking for the sale, you're not selling. Instead, you're creating an environment where people want to buy.
Interesting. So let's talk about the sales mindset and psychology. What mindset shift does the book recommend for boosting confidence and effectiveness in sales?
Well, it's really interesting. The way this process is set up is it removes the need to close. These offers, when you build an offer that, like the ones that are outlined in this book, a qualified buyer will just say yes. So when you're going into a sales conversation, you don't really need to sell the offer. All you
Yes.
have to do is present it, and a qualified buyer will say yes. In fact, the more you try to sell it, the more you try to apply sales pressure, the less it works.
So, how important is belief in your product or service when communicating value to clients?
Well, it's everything, and I would say that that's one of the things that you can't hide is your body language. And when you feel unsure about your offer, or you feel unsure about the process, it starts coming through in your body language, and people pick up on it. So the nice thing about this is you remove that element. You have to trust the process. And when you do, you have to trust your offer, and the offer is a part of the process. When you do, you don't worry about whether they say yes or no. We celebrate the no's as much as we celebrate the yeses. And, I got a no the other day, and that's fine. I don't worry about that. I'm assuming things are working as they should. And I can tell you in the case where I just got this no, I actually already knew that they would not be a good client.
Mhm.
And so when they came back and said no, I was like, of course, the process worked.
Certainly. So, what habits or routines did you recommend for maintaining peak sales performance?
Well, it's kind of a shift. This goes back to your mindset question. These offers are not meant to sell. Selling
Mhm.
is a side effect. These offers are meant to serve. And so the best habit would be just have a mindset of serving. And, I had somebody about a month ago that we presented one of our offers to. The reality is, I knew this person would never be a client. I knew that. But for a variety of reasons, I decided to offer this first time offer. And we don't make money on these first time offers. I mean, a few dollars, but not much. It's not how we pay our bills. And I knew this person had a real problem in their life. And I knew that they hadn't figured out the problem on their own. And I knew at the end of this, just doing this little first time offer, they would be significantly ahead of where they are. So I would say that that's something else. And it even ties back into the whole question about confidence. We know we have an offer correct when, if our best friend came to us with a problem, our best solution, our best recommendation would be, you need this offer. And I've had that happen a number of times. And for this person, I wasn't offering them the first time offer, because I thought they'd be a client. I knew they wouldn't. I knew where their revenue was. I knew they couldn't afford our fees. I offered it because I thought it would help them. It would help them achieve their goals. And um, and actually, let me give a story. We haven't talked about this, but 3.5 years ago, I was in a coma, and they didn't expect me to live. And I had COVID, and I was on the ventilator. And right before, 4 days before I went on the ventilator, the daughter of a lifetime mentor died of COVID. Well, when I woke up from the ventilator, her brother reached out to me and said, "Hey, I need some help with marketing." And I initially replied, and I said, "Mike, I said I'm not working until the new year. I said I'm just too weak. I'm taking some time to recover." He's like, "Okay." I said, "Reach back then." Secretly, I was hoping he would never reach back, because his parents mean so much to me, and the last thing I would want to do is hurt that relationship with business. So he reached out to me, and I said, "I'm still not ready. Reach out again." And finally, he came back a third time. And he's an example of, I knew he would never be a client,
Mhm.
but I saw the problem he had, and I knew the best advice I could give to him was they buy our first time offer, because it would help him move in the direction where he wanted to go. Well, here's the thing that's really interesting is, at that time, I was struggling with something called survivor's guilt. It just didn't make sense to me why I lived, because I was supposed to die. I lived, and so many people died, including his sister. And so here I am. I'm talking to this guy. He's the son of a mentor that's very important to me. His sister died of the same disease I survived. And in that situation, the best advice I could give him was to buy my first time offer, because it would help him solve problems. First time offers are about serving people. Sales is a byproduct.
Mr. Craig Andrews, let's celebrate for your second life. So let's talk about the techniques and strategy. What are the most effective techniques in the book for closing deals quickly?
Well, and I would say again, the book is really about how to build the offers.
Yes.
And um, when you get the offer right and you follow it through and you do the things, you do the workshops, that naturally closes deals faster. So the technique, kind of in pursuit of your question, the technique about building the offer, it's really funny. I found the number one thing that keeps people from building their best offer is their insatiable desire to sell. And that's a problem for a lot of business owners. They just have this great desire to sell, and that desire to sell gets in the way of them creating great offers. So when we're building one, when we're working with somebody to do it, it takes a full day. Um, and the first 3 hours of the day, we're focused on shifting their mindset from a mindset of selling to a mindset of serving. And once we get that mindset shift, we reach a point where we ask one question. And usually within 10 minutes of asking that question, we have the basic structure of the offer. And it was really neat. I remember one time
Mhm.
I was in Orlando and we got to the point of the question. And this was somebody who really liked to sell. But I framed the question in the right way. And the question was, hey, if you're imagine you had lunch with a friend who expressed this problem that we had outlined, and you knew they would never be a customer, but you decided that you're going to commit 5 hours of your life to helping your friend just because you care for your friend. What would you do in those 5 hours? And he was like, oh, that's easy. I would do this, 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 and this. Within 5 minutes, we had the offer. Now we had work the rest of the day. We were working on the messaging for the offer and all that. But once we had him in the right mindset, it just took 5 minutes to figure out what his offer would be, the basic structure.
The basic structure, people. So, what advice does the book give for turning objections into opportunities?
The objections basically drop because again, when you have the offer right and you put it in front of a qualified buyer, they're going to say yes. It's just what they do.
Certainly. So, Mr. Craig, what will be your short term and long term goals in writing, as well as being your profession?
Right. You know, I published two books at the
Hmm.
same time, which I don't recommend anybody do. It's funny. I thought the hard part of writing would be writing the book. Turns out the hard part is the editing process. So to others out there, don't do what I did. Publish one book at a time, and probably in a year or two, I'm going to publish another book, probably titled "Make Marketing Magical." Now, really, my book "Make Sales Magical" is a marketing book. Because when you do the marketing right, the sales are magical. But the next book would probably be "Make Marketing Magical," and it would talk about things that you can do to um, create tight emotional bonds uh, leading up to somebody buying your first time offer.
Looking forward for that, Mr. Craig, and good luck to your goals. So, how can techniques and make sales magical be applied to different industries or sales models?
I think the biggest restriction based on the way that's set up is you have to have a higher ticket service. You know, I would say 20K, 20K to 2 million is the number we throw out. In reality, it could be more than 2 million. But the the thing is, you're adding some value before the sale. And one of the things that we ask people is we ask them what their lifetime value is, their customer lifetime value is for an average customer. And once we understand that, we're taking money out of the lifetime value and moving it on the front end to assist in the acquisition. because there's a saying out there that whoever spends the most for customer acquisition wins. Whoever's willing to spend the most to acquire a new customer will probably get the new customer. And so it's really about taking some of that lifetime value, front loading it. But what we've found is in the end, it ends up paying for itself because in the process of building that trust, um, we found that they're actually willing to pay more for your services than somebody who hasn't been through this process.
So, Mr. Craig, what are your struggles in writing make sales magical?
The writing part wasn't hard. I write every day. Um,
Yes.
and so writing it wasn't hard. The hard part for me was editing it. There's Frank Sinatra when he was doing movies, he was famous for saying, "Hey, if you want to," the director would say, "Hey, let's see that again." Frank Sinatra would say, "If you want to see it again, roll back the tape and watch it." He would just do one take, and there's a part of me that's like that. Once I wrote the book, I was kind of done with it. I didn't want to read it another 6 times, which I had to do during the editing process. And I wasn't doing that just with one book, but 2 books.
Mm. Two books at one time, people. That's awesome, Mr. Craig. Looking forward for more and more empowering books. So you have also a podcast. Can you tell us about it?
Oh yeah, so it's the Leaders and Legacies podcast, and it's about making an impact beyond yourself. And the thought, the kind of the genesis of that, so I was in a coma 3.5 years ago. I was in a coma for 6 weeks. And while I was in the coma, my team stepped up and ran the business. And they were amazing. Uh, when I woke up from my coma. It was, and when you wake up from a coma, your mind is a little foggy. And so it was about 2 weeks after I woke up, my wife started telling me what had been happening in the world and including my business. And when she told me what my team had done, it was just amazing. It brought tears to my eyes. I've never been prouder. And it's actually, I consider it my greatest accomplishment in business. And so when I launched the podcast, I realized that I'd made an impact beyond myself. I realized I'd made a bigger impact than I thought possible. And so Leaders and Legacies is about celebrating everyday leaders that are making an impact beyond themselves.
Mr. Craig Andrews, again, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. So before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, in its fifth season, people, fifth season, with Chef Alessandro, one of the specialty chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Please do listen to our latest episode. We are reading our letter senders all over the world. So please do listen, Food 101, wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Craig, after reading the book itself, what one change could have the biggest impact on your sales approach?
I think it will give you the foundation to break free from feeling held hostage by your sales team. Again, these offers, when you put them in front of a qualified buyer, they will say yes. And all of a sudden, I think that lets you build a sales process that anybody can learn and combine it with an offer that nobody can refuse. And when that happens, some real magic starts to happen.
Nobody can refuse because the oxytocin is already there. Mr. Greg Andrews, again, thank you so much for sharing your books to the world as well as your podcast. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your achievements and, of course, your books and podcast itself?
Yeah. So, yeah, would love for people to listen to the Leaders and Legacies podcast, and love for you to reach out on LinkedIn. That's the best place to find me, or at my website, alliesforme.com.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Greg Andrews because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering books like this to come. And of course, more episodes of the podcast itself. So, Mr. Greg, thank you so much for your time.
Daniel, thank you. It's been a delight.
More to come, people. See you soon. So, Mr. Greg,